Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell, and this is my review of Eddington, which is in theaters around the country this week after premiering at the Cannes Film Festival earlier this year. I think it's definitely the most interesting movie in theaters this weekend, but if you stick around after I talk about Eddington, I've got a bonus mini review for I Know What You Did Last Summer, which is kind of almost the opposite type of movie, but I also wanted to share my thoughts on that one. Eddington is the fourth feature film from Ari Aster, who's made one film I love, Hereditary, one film that I quite liked, Midsommar, and one film whose ambition I admired but wasn't quite for me, Beau is Afraid. Conceptually, Eddington is arguably Ari Aster's most grounded film to date, but this isn't a story that shows us the world teetering on the edge of an abyss. This is a story where we follow all of the characters down into it. The movie takes place in the town of Eddington, New Mexico in May of 2020 as pandemic lockdowns begin to stir controversy, and the country will soon be rocked by the Black Lives Matter movement. Joaquin Phoenix plays Joe Cross, the sheriff of Eddington, whose belief that masking and lockdown restrictions are a threat to the town's liberty inspires him to run for mayor against sitting mayor Ted Garcia, played by Pedro Pascal. Mayor Garcia is a staunch advocate of obeying health guidelines and is also working to bring a massive AI/server farm to the city of Eddington, which is another major point of contention between him and Sheriff Cross.
That was devastating. You can't keep your own office going, but you're going to run mine. Leave your mess here and start a whole new one.
Now, if the idea of a movie taking place in 2020 that focuses heavily on public unrest and the mainstreaming of all kinds of conspiracy theories doesn't sit well with you, I don't blame you. More than anything else, Ari Aster is able to capture the atmosphere of mid-2020 when nobody was really sure what was going to happen next, and everybody was feeling the toll of what was happening. I think that everyone in some way, big or small, went a little crazy during that time, and it's not a time that many people savor the idea of revisiting. But Eddington isn't a slice-of-life look at two warring city officials. I mean, it starts that way, but then it spirals into a lot of other things. Aster's last film, Beau is Afraid, was in its own way about the escalating madness of the world around its main character, and Eddington shares a lot of that DNA. What starts as a dispute over civil regulations becomes something much, much bigger until by the end, every aspect of life in Eddington is pure chaos. I think it should be said that a lot of people are probably not going to like what they see in this movie. At first glance, it may come across as an all sides are bad depiction of issues that the U.S. is still dealing with, including Black Lives Matter and the health and safety regulations enacted by city and federal governments in 2020. At times, Aster does leave those lines a little too blurry, but it's also important to note that depicting characters and their actions doesn't necessarily mean that the film endorses those views. One of the things I liked most about Eddington is that it is a stark portrayal of flawed individuals. Some of them are acting out of fear, some out of self-interest, some out of ignorance, and many of them out of a combination of all three. Some characters begin the movie on one side of an issue and end up on the polar opposite side because that's what will serve them best. Others may have views or attitudes that are ridiculed now, but were reasonable in that moment. It's undeniable that negative qualities like hypocrisy and selfishness are destructive forces, but they're not limited to one ideology or one ultimate goal. A film can portray deeply flawed characters without implying that the issues surrounding those characters are meaningless, and there are characters in the movie who do act in good faith. It's just that they're severely outnumbered. Now, if you've seen just one movie from Ari Aster, you know that they are not bright and hopeful. His movies are largely very grim and misanthropic, and Eddington is no different. For the second consecutive time, Aster's film revolves around Joaquin Phoenix in the lead role. Sheriff Joe Cross is a man living a life of, at first, quiet desperation, attempting to connect with his wife, played by Emma Stone, whose past trauma has put a wall between them. Unable to change those circumstances, Cross decides to change the ones he can and runs for mayor on an anti-masking, anti-technology platform. This decision sets off a cascade of increasingly dramatic consequences, starting with a feud ignited between Cross and Mayor Garcia. Pedro Pascal has been all over the place in the last few months, and his character is difficult to fully decipher. Does he mean what he says, or is he using these issues as a populist platform so that he can sell out the city to big tech? It's a question that opens the door for Cross to sow doubt and anger, something that he tries to do more desperately as the town begins to see more and more protests and civil unrest. There are a lot of twists and turns in Eddington. Every time I thought I'd figured out where this movie was going or what it was really about, it would turn on a dime and go in a different direction. I mean, you can trace a line from the beginning to the end, but it's not a straight line, and whether audiences are going to buy into this journey is a big question. Add to that the politics at play in the movie, which it embraces and doesn't shy away from, and I think that Eddington is going to be one of the most controversial and divisive movies of the year. People from across the political spectrum are going to find elements to both love and hate, which could spell trouble for its reception in big cities, which is a key market for movies like this. In his career as a director, Ari Aster has only made movies with A24, and it's obvious that they have no interest in reining him in creatively. Eddington is not 3 hours long like Beau is Afraid, but it still clocks in at about 2.5 hours, and I'm not convinced it needed to be that long. Ari Aster is throwing so many different ideas at the canvas that it's tough to decide if it's a Jackson Pollock-like masterpiece or just a big old mess. I think it leans closer to the Pollock side, but I can't deny that it is messy. And because this isn't a movie about a town being pulled back from the brink, but plummeting over it, it can also be exhausting to watch. If you're buying a ticket to an Ari Aster movie hoping for a good versus evil redemption story, you're going to be disappointed. Joaquin Phoenix is a fantastic actor, and he puts in another strong performance here. Joe Cross is a man who uses bravado and supreme confidence to mask the insecurity and fear underneath, which is a type that is very common in today's society, and he lets that fear drive him to take actions that only result in more pain and destruction. He believes that he's the savior of Eddington, but he may be leading it to its doom. Pedro Pascal is good for what's required of his role, but this isn't a two-hander, as many might assume. This is Joaquin Phoenix's movie, and Pascal is just one player in the movie's events. Emma Stone is strong, as always, but other than establishing Joe's home life, her role as Joe's wife, Louise, is somewhat underwritten compared to other characters in the film. Everyone in this movie is dealing with the trauma of the pandemic, but Louise is dealing with more, and a lot of her journey takes place off screen. I actually think that you could make a movie about her character that would be equally as interesting as this movie, if not quite as bombastic. Austin Butler plays a guru of sorts who appears briefly in the film, and given his influencer status, you might expect him to be perhaps the biggest con artist of them all. The movie flirts with this question, but it doesn't really address it. It's possible that he could also be the most genuine character in the film. I also enjoyed Deirdre O'Connell as Louise's mother, who was already prone to conspiratorial thinking and has been pushed even deeper by the pandemic. O'Connell was great in The Penguin as Frances Cobb, Oswald's mother, and here she plays a very different type of overbearing mom. Is she the biggest hardliner of them all, or can she even be swayed by the potential power that Joe is seeking? Eddington is a tough movie to figure out when it comes to where I land on it. Ari Aster's ambition in tackling all of the things that he does in this movie is admirable, but at times I think that ambition is bigger than his ability to deliver. A satire or a dark comedy, which this movie often intends to be, has to answer the question, what are you trying to say? Blazing Saddles was an indictment on racism. Tropic Thunder was a commentary on the ridiculousness of clueless actors. I can trace what Aster is saying through some individual characters, but I'm not really sure what the movie is saying other than society broke back in 2020 and it's probably never going to be put back together again. If that's the message of the movie, I don't really think it's one that needed to be told across 2.5 hours. At the same time, I love a lot of what's in this film, and Aster remains one of the most interesting directors working today, even if his bleak and nihilistic worldview is beginning to wear on me. I mean, I get that the world can be misery, but that's not all that the world is. Some movies make you want to dance or call a loved one or get some friends together to talk about it in a big room together. Ari Aster's movies make me want to sit in a dark room alone for 12 hours. Eddington may be depressing, but I can't deny that it's effective. It's a chaotic, sometimes unsettling, and often brilliant film that doubles down on Ari Aster's signature pessimism. It's both sharp and scattershot, ambitious, but at times unfocused. Balancing its strengths and weaknesses, the positives do win out over the negatives, so I'm going to give it a rating of it's good, with the caveat that I think public opinion, including yours, will be as varied on this movie as perhaps any other movie this year. So those are my thoughts on Eddington. It is a recommendation for me, though I do acknowledge that this is a divisive and flawed film. Let's turn to another movie, one that's on the other end of the spectrum, and it's a movie that I think is more formula than fresh. It is the reboot/legacy sequel, I Know What You Did Last Summer, a follow-up to the 1997 original starring Jennifer Love Hewitt, Freddie Prinze Jr., Sarah Michelle Gellar, and Ryan Phillippe. Like the original, this version takes place in the North Carolina town of Southport, which has struggled for nearly 3 decades to put the serial murders of the late 90s behind it. Gathering in Southport is a new group of friends who venture out on a windy cliffside road on July 4th and accidentally cause a car accident that results in a man's death. Like their late Gen X/early millennial counterparts, they swear themselves to secrecy and meet up again 1 year later when a mysterious fisherman with a deadly hook starts hunting them one by one after sending notes confirming that the killer is indeed aware of their activities the previous July. This new group includes Danica, played by Madeline Klein, a vapid socialite who doesn't let murder get in the way of a good punchline. Ava, played by Chase Sui Wonders, who's the member of the group who takes their role in the accidental death of this man, hardest of all of them. Milo, played by Jonah Hauer-King, a soft-spoken nice guy who's looking out for Ava's best interests. Teddy, played by Tyreek Withers, a rich jock who's ready to take on the killer in single combat. And Stevie, played by Sarah Pidgeon, a former friend who's pulled back into the group through these tragic circumstances, presumably because the writers thought, hey, maybe all of our main characters shouldn't just be carbon copies of the original movie. Returning to guide this next generation are Jennifer Love Hewitt as Julie James, who struggled to put Southport behind her, and Freddie Prinze Jr. as Ray Bronson, who settled down in Southport as a bar owner and doesn't relish the idea of another generation having to face off against a homicidal fisherman. One way of looking at 2025's I Know What You Did Last Summer is to call it a loving tribute to the original 90s film, a faithful recreation in both tone and execution that honors what came before. Alternatively, you could argue that it's a derivative copy of a once successful formula, a formula that was rejuvenated in 1997 during the Kevin Williamson-led horror renaissance, but now comes across as tired and uninspired, watered down by dozens of other similar films over the past 28 years. I think you can guess which side I fall on. I was a teenager when the original film was released, and it was a memorable part of my adolescence. And though I do have fond memories of the original, I can acknowledge that it wasn't exactly revolutionary. And what we have here is a copy of that self-aware copy, stripped of anything particularly notable or surprising. If you've seen one of these slasher films, it feels like you've seen them all. But in this case, if you've seen the original, you've also literally seen this slasher film already. Director Jennifer Caton Robinson, who previously helmed Netflix's 2022 film Do Revenge, has created a duplicate so faithful that it's indistinguishable from scores of other mediocre horror films. The script from Robinson and Sam Lansky takes a few stabs at sharp-hooked satire and wit, but they often miss the mark and elicited more eye rolls than laughs, at least for me. One line near the end made me glad that I was already seated near the exit, so I could get out of there as fast as possible. Now, this version does obviously respect the original, and bringing in the 2 stars from the first film who survived that movie lends it some legitimacy, but there's nothing new here. I know What You Did Last Summer already, and the nostalgic millennials who are going to show up to see this movie probably do as well. I can't see many of us being taken in by this retelling, and the movie lacks the wit or originality to win over a new generation of fans. I also think this film is seriously at risk of alienating us oldies who show up to see it, because there are a couple of things that just feel like a personal attack, a punishment for loving the first version. It's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him. If you're in the market for bland dialogue, stock characters, and uninspired kills, then I guess this might be your movie, but I suspect that most audiences expect more, even from a reboot. For me, this movie was a big ball of nothing, attaching a familiar name and a couple familiar faces to a tired formula in order to wring a few dollars out of my wallet. It worked, but I'm not happy about it. It does briefly spark to life in one creative sequence, but even that turns out to be a fake out. It's not the worst slasher film I've ever seen, but it's far from the best, and in an era where franchises like Scream have actually been able to make a comeback, that's a real shame. So on my personal rating scale, I'm giving I Know What You Did Last Summer 2025 a rating of not a fan. It has the most basic of thrills that horror fans might enjoy, but other than that, I just don't think that there's a whole lot there. So those are my thoughts on Eddington and I Know What You Did Last Summer. Both movies are in theaters now. Are you heading out to see one or both of them this weekend? Have you already seen them? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching this review. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell so you know when I upload a new video. And as always, stay tuned for the latest in movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.